Okay, cs141, hello again. We've got a little bit more material to learn about how to handle inputs. We don't really have any good way to handle input yet, and the way we're going to handle that is what's called a scanner. Now, we had a scanner that was being used in Lab 2, but we didn't actually use it ourselves. It was already written for us. We didn't actually have to write anything. So we're going to actually see how that code works and how we could write scanners of our own so that we could read inputs for ourselves. So this stuff I've already mentioned. This last point is important. Scanner is a type. It's a new type of variable, just like string was a type of variable and simple grid was a type of variable. Now, if you note, scanner, simple grid, and string are all starting with capital letters, and int and double start with lowercase letters. There is a reason for that, and it's the difference between what are called primitive and reference types. We'll start learning about that next week, but we're not going to get there yet. So for now, we'll just think of scanner as a new type that has to start with a capital letter. One thing we have to do to create a scanner, we have to import it at the top of the file. We actually had to do this with simple grid and with color as well. We have to do it with scanner, and we have to do it with a lot of these types that start with capital letters. And then inside main, to create the scanner, we actually have a line like this, which is actually quite similar to the line we would have to do to create a simple grid. So this is called a constructor invocation, and here's what's happening. We're creating a new scanner variable. So here we've got the type, and here we've got the name of the variable. That's a standard construction anytime you're creating a new variable. And we're assigning it the result of this thing in the right-hand side. Now what's in the right-hand side is what's called a constructor invocation. We've got this keyword new, a special word in Java, and then we've got scanner, which is the name of the class. If you notice, the name of this constructor always exactly matches the name of the class. And then we've got the thing we want the scanner to be created out of. We want to connect it to system.in. Now system.in is very similar to system.out, except that system.out is what we do to do output. So system.out.println, print stuff out. System.in reads stuff in, but it actually reads it in this very raw format, which is very hard to work with. So at one point, a lot of people were writing their own special utilities to handle this. And so eventually Java just came along and created a scanner, which is kind of this easy standard way to read system.in. And so that's what we have now. So we're saying a new variable of type scanner, call it scan, and assign it the result of this constructor invocation, give me a new scanner connected to system.in. And so that's what that will do. And so here's how we would use this. We'd create our new scanner, and we'd say, okay, enter an integer. Now what we're going to do is take the scanner, and we're going to invoke nextInt. This is a method very similar to getNumRows, getNumColumns, and setColor from simple grid. This is going to give us back an integer, which we're going to assign into this variable here on the left. This is actually another variable declaration. Then we're going to say, hey, you entered, and then concatenate in the number so we can see what number they actually entered. And so this is just a very, very simple use of the scanner. And once the scanner is created, you're using it to read input here. If you read more input down here, you would use the same scanner. You don't ever create two scanners connected to system.in. You always just create one, and then you use it everywhere within the program. Now suppose you want to read doubles. Well, if nextInt is the method that reads ints, it just goes to be assumed that nextDouble is the method that reads doubles, and in fact it is. And so this is nothing unexpected. Create the scanner, say enter a double, invoke the method, and we get back a double. Now note, though we've named this scanner SC, the most common names for scanner are scan and SC, or possibly even just scanner, but in lowercase. Doesn't really matter what you name it. You can name it Bob or Mary or Alice or whatever you'd like to name it, just as long as it's a legal Java identifier. So we know we can read ints and doubles with nextInt and nextDouble. We can also read strings. You would think that the method to do that is nextString, but of course it's not, because that would be too easy. It's actually just called next. So when you want to read a string, you just do next, and that'll read it into a string. Now I should mention, the string that it will read is up until the first space or up until the first enter key. It won't actually read any spaces for this kind of string. There is a way to get a string with spaces, and we'll see that in a moment. But just to read a string up until the first space or enter key, you would just use next. Now, of course, strings are allowed to have spaces in them, and you would like to be able to read things with spaces in them with a scanner, and so the way you would do that is using this method next line, which reads up until the first enter key. There's some tricks when you mix next and next line, which I'll show at the very end, but do keep in mind that if you use next and next line together and your program does something very unexpected, you have to keep track of what happens to the new lines. I'll talk about that at the end. But for now, next reads up until the first space or the first new line. Next line reads all the way up until a new line, so it will include spaces. So the methods we have with scanner that we care about, there's the constructor. There's also next int, next double, next, and next line. Those are really the only ones we're going to use in cs141. And these are methods. These are just like the methods get num rows, get num columns, and set color that SimpleGrid has. These are called classes, these types. And each new type like this that we learn is going to have its own collection of methods. There's actually a whole documentation system that Java has called JavaDoc that will list out all of the methods. We saw a little bit of that. We'll see that more as the term goes along. So some quirks about scanner. You have to print something out before you read something in. Otherwise, it looks like BlueJ is stuck. And so I'll demo this. So here's an example. I'm calling this program print first. So you notice here we're importing our scanner. We have our main method. We're creating a scanner. Now we're not printing anything out. I've commented this line out so the compiler's ignoring it. We're just reading in some integer into this variable, and then we're printing out what it is. So if we go ahead and run this, so look, it looks like it's stuck. Nothing's happening, and this little barbershop pole is spinning. Whenever that happens, and you will do this, everybody does this, I still do this sometimes when I'm not, when I'm trying to do stuff really fast. Just right-click on this and then reset virtual machine. That basically kills it. This is something that will happen with scanner. It can also happen if you accidentally write an infinite loop. And you will write an infinite loop at some point. There's no way around it. It always happens. So you need to know how to recover from that. Now, if you note over here, if we were to put this print line in and then run this again, enter a number, 76, bam. Everything works fine. I'm going to hit Control K or Apple K on my Apple Mac to go ahead and clear this screen and then close it. So one other thing I'd like to show you, if we run this again and it gets hung like this, you can actually hit Control T on Windows or Apple T on a Mac, and that will pop up the terminal. And you notice there's no prompts because we didn't print anything, but the cursor here is blinking, asking for our input. So we put in a number, and we get, number was 87. And I think I accidentally hit this key. I think that's where that came from. I think I hit that as I was typing stuff in. So that shouldn't be there. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing, you should only create one scanner that's connected to system.in and then use it for the rest of the program. If you create two, strange things may happen. Strange things may not happen. It may work fine, which is what's especially bad about this kind of unpredictable error is, it may work fine every time you run it, and then when you give it to the client that's paying you all this money for this software, that's the moment that it may choose to crash and then make you look really bad and you lose the contract, and then, you get to file for unemployment, and that would really suck. We don't want that to happen. So some other notes, if you forget to import scanner, you'll get an error. So going back to this example here, I'm going to comment this out. This process of putting there's the error message. This process of putting / in front of things is called commenting out. It's something that if you have a line of code that you don't want to delete and then potentially have to retype, but you don't want to use it right now, you just stick a / in front of it. It turns that line into a comment. The phrase used is called commenting out. I do this with grocery lists and to-do lists and stuff. If I have something on the list and I'm not sure that I need it there, I'll put a / in front of it, and then my eye will just zip right past it because I'm like, oh, well, that's commented out. And then if somebody else looks at my grocery list or my, to-do list or something, and they'll be like, well, if they're another computer scientist, their eye will go past it too and everything's fine. But then when we give our to-do list to somebody else, like if we're doing a grant application with another department, they'll be like, well, why are these things on the to-do list? I don't think we have to do those things. And we're like, oh, well, they're commented out, so those don't count. And then they'll be like, your discipline is weird, which is completely true. Anyway, so let's see this error message. So this is commented out, so it's as if this line is not here, so we forgot to import it. We compile, it's going to grab this line, it's going to highlight this, it's going to say cannot find symbol class scanner. When you get that cannot find symbol class whatever, that either means you spelled it wrong, you got the capitalization wrong, or you forgot to import it. So this will happen with simple grid, or any other class that needs to be imported. If you don't import it, this is the message you'll get. And if you get that message, you don't have to like memorize these import lines. You need to know that if you get that error message that you need the import line in there, and you need to be able to find in your notes or somewhere the import line. An exam question is not going to be like, write the import statements, because that's just the least interesting part of computer science. And in fact, there are more sophisticated tools out there than BlueJ, which actually stick the import statements in for you under various ways, which is really kind of useful. But if you get the error message, you need to know that it needs to be there. If you try to read something of the wrong type, let's see what happens. So we'll go back to this example. This is commented back in. This is put back in, and we're looking for an int. Okay, so we'll run this again. But now it says enter a number. What if I'm really clever and I type blah, which is not a number? What do you think is going to happen? We're going to get a crash, right? And so this is what crashes look like in BlueJ. The line gets highlighted where the crash happened, and you've got what's called the name of the exception down here, Java util input mismatch exception. The Java util you don't really care about, input mismatch exception, and it's telling you null in the scanner. And if you go to your terminal, you get more information about it. This is called a stack trace, saying that this line called this line, called this line, called this line, called this line, which generated an error. And these are the line numbers. Now, if you notice, this is in Java. This is in the code for scanner, because scanner itself is just Java code, which somebody else wrote. And, we don't know anything about these lines, so there's nothing we can tell about that. This is what we care about, because this is the first place in our code where the error happens. That's just telling us the line number. And actually, you can see BlueJ, line 14, is taking that and highlighting it. If you want to see your line numbers, you can always go up here to Options, Preferences, Display Line Numbers. There we go. Now we can see line numbers. You can see, in fact, it is line 14 that's generating that particular error. And we're getting input mismatch, which makes sense. We asked for an int, but we gave it a string. And so anytime you give the wrong input type, that's what happens. So one other note, if you have a next followed by a next line, that's weird. Weird things happen. Let me explain this, and then I'll show you what's going on, and then we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail. So next line reads up to the new line, and it actually removes the new line character. It actually includes the new line. Next reads up to a new line, or up to a space, but it doesn't actually remove new lines. It will remove spaces, but it won't remove new lines, which is a little bit weird. So the weird result of this is, if you use next, the very next call to next line will actually read the nothingness before the new line, then it will read the new line. So next followed by next line doesn't work. Let me show you an example. I'm going to go ahead and clear this. And I've got this test scanner example here. So we're creating a scanner. We're saying, what is your name? And we're assuming the name is one word, so we're reading the name. This is the line that fixes it. I'm going to comment that out. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Good. Oh. What? Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. Okay. There we go. I have a tendency, as soon as I write a line to compile, I don't like to write, 50 lines of code without compiling, because then it's going to take me forever to fix the compiler errors. Or if I compile very frequently by repeatedly hitting Control-K, I don't get into a situation where I have more than a line or two of code that I need to compile. I'm sort of like an obsessive compiler. Like, when you're using Microsoft Word, like some people are obsessive savers. They save after every sentence, sometimes after every half sentence. And then some people save, like, once a night. And then, I don't know, I'm just worried about losing data. So, scanner, we're asking what's your name, we're reading in the name, we're saying hello, we're saying what is your quest, we're reading that as the next line, because that could be a whole bunch of words, because it's probably to seek the Holy Grail, because this is obviously a reference to Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And we're saying what your quest is, then we're asking what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow, assume it's an African swallow, and the value is an integer, then we're reading in the velocity as an integer. And then we're printing it out. Now, this looks fine from what we know about next and next line, not taking into account what we just learned about the way next treats new lines in a little bit weird of a way. So let's see what happens. It's going to look a little funny. So we're going to run this, and it's going to say, what is your name? I'm going to say Bob, enter. Then it's going to say, hello, Bob. And then look, what is your quest? Quest is empty. And then it's going to ask for the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow. I'm going to say 8, velocity is 8. So what the heck just happened here? Let me walk through and show you. So our inputs, what we wanted to enter was Bob, enter. I'm using /n to represent the enter key, because that's the special code for it. Then define the Grail, /n, and then 76, /n. And so that's the sequence of inputs that I'm going to enter when prompted, and the sequence of methods reading that are going to be, next and then next line. There's going to be more after that, but these two are enough to trigger the problem. So watch what happens. So when we call next, that gobbles up Bob, that reads that in, up to the new line, but it doesn't remove the new line, it leaves it there. Okay? Now, Bob's been read. When we do next line, well, it reads up to the new line and includes it. Well, what's before the new line? Nothing. So it reads the nothingness and actually returns a string with 0 characters in it, which, believe it or not, is a legal string. It's called the empty string. And then gobbles up this new line. Now this, to find the Grail, this just doesn't actually get read at all. This is not even there. So the problem is this first call to next reads up to but not including the new line. This next call to next line just kind of reads the nothing that's left before this new line, which is really not what we want. So the way to handle this, believe it or not, it's a little weird. I'm going to go ahead and clear this window, go back over to here with our test scanner. The way to handle this is after you do a next, if you know you want to do a next line after that, you actually have to stick in an extra next line call just to read that sort of wasted new line hanging around at the end. So if we put this in, and then we run this will do the right thing now. Right, so what is your name? Bob. Hello, Bob. What is your quest? To seek the Holy Grail. To seek, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? 9. Great. So that works. So once again, we need this next line in there to grab the new line that this next didn't read. We could also change the way we do our input to just sort of put everything with spaces in between, but you don't know what the quest is going to be asked. You don't know what the next question is going to be. So this is just this weird artifact of the way next works. I don't know that we'll run into this much in 141. It's possible you'll see this in Lab 3, depending on when we do the quiz. I say quiz, the Lord of the Rings quiz, a program that like asks you about things and you answer some questions about it, you're going to write a program where the user is going to play this quiz game, and it's going to be, they're going to be asked questions. And if you want to have answers that have more than one word in them and use next line, you have to keep in mind how this next works. It's a little tricky. It's kind of annoying, honestly, but it's something that you do have to know about. Cool. Well, that's actually all I've got. Yay, Scanner.